All right, team, grab a seat and let's get started. Today we're opening up the case file on what is arguably the 20th century's most notorious unsolved puzzle, the Zodiac Killer. Between the late 1960s and early 1970s, this phantom literally terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area. And he wasn't just a murderer, he was a psychological tactician. He taunted the press, completely outsmarted law enforcement, and left behind this wild trail of ciphers that baffled intelligence agencies for decades. So, our objective in today's explainer is to analyze exactly how this killer operated. We're going to reconstruct his behavioral footprint to see what we can learn from the evidence. Let's dive right in.
Here's our investigative roadmap for today's briefing. We'll be hitting 1. Mapping the initial attacks. 2. Establishing the killer's profile. 3. The critical near miss. 4. Ciphers and threats. 5. Prime suspects. And finally, 6. An unsolved mystery.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1. Mapping the initial attacks, tracing the escalation of a phantom.
We really need to trace the timeline of this phantom chronologically to understand his origins and his methods. The terror began silently on December 20th, 1968 at Lake Herman Road. A young couple on their first date was tragically forced from their car and shot. Then, for 6 months, the killer went completely dark. But on July 4th, 1969, at Blue Rock Springs, he struck again. This time, he used a blinding flashlight before firing. One victim died, but miraculously, the other survived and actually caught a glimpse of his face. By August, he started sending his infamous letters. But guys, the most terrifying escalation happened in September 1969. At Lake Berryessa, we're talking broad daylight. He approached a couple wearing this black executioner-style hood with a crosshair symbol on it. He tied them up, stabbed them, and then calms wrote the date, the time, and the weapon used directly on their car door. Just chillin'.
And this perfectly illustrates his operational methodology. He wasn't just killing to kill, it was a performance. Step 1 was the attack itself. Step 2 was the immediate flex. After the Blue Rock Springs attack, he called the Vallejo police from a payphone just 40 minutes later to confess. And he did the exact same thing after Lake Berryessa, calling the cops at 7:40 p.m. Then step 3 was the media manipulation. He'd mail these letters to newspapers demanding front-page coverage, and he'd prove his identity by including withheld forensic evidence, things only the killer would know, like the exact type of bullets used and descriptions of the victim's clothing.
Moving on to Section 2, establishing the killer's profile. Structural analysis of the behavioral footprint.
Let's put on our behavioral science hats for a second. What did these early attacks actually tell the initial investigators? Well, they quickly isolated 7 distinct patterns. 1, he exclusively targeted young couples. 2, he attacked on weekends or holidays, like Independence Day. 3, he definitely preferred the cover of night or dusk. 4, he proudly confessed just to challenge authority. 5, he stalked known dating or picnic spots. 6, the attacks always happened inside or right next to vehicles. And 7, he consistently stayed near bodies of water. Now, because male victims actually survived 2 of these attacks while the female victims did not, early profilers theorized that the killer might have been frustrated in love, or maybe harbored a deep-seated specific hatred for women.
Which brings us to Section 3, the critical near miss, the catastrophic error at Presidio Heights.
Serial killers rarely stick to the script forever, and the events of October 11, 1969 represent one of the most agonizing moments in forensic history. He broke his own pattern. He targeted a lone cab driver named Paul Stein in Presidio Heights, a wealthy San Francisco neighborhood. He shot Stein point blank at 9:30 p.m., then sat in the front seat, calmly cutting off a piece of Stein's blood-soaked shirt as a trophy. Kids watching from a second-floor window across the street immediately called the cops. So the question we have to ask ourselves as investigators is this: how on earth did the killer speak directly to responding officers and then just simply walk away into the fog?
Well, an absolutely catastrophic breakdown in communication occurred. The police dispatch mistakenly reported the suspect as a black male. So 2 responding officers rushed toward the scene and they actually crossed paths with a white male walking away in the light fog. Because they're looking for a black man, they don't even draw their weapons. Actually, scratch that, they literally stop the man and ask if he's seen anything suspicious. The man, who is the Zodiac Killer, calmly points them down the street, claiming some guy with a gun just ran that way. And the officers rush off. If they had just looked closely, they would have seen Paul Stein's blood splattered all over the guy's jacket. He slipped right through their fingers, leaving behind nothing but a set of fingerprints on the cab.
All right, Section 4, ciphers, taunts, and threats. Psychological warfare and the forensic footprint.
With the physical trail going cold, we have to pivot to the evidence he left behind: his ciphers, his taunts, and his threats. Make no mistake, this was psychological warfare. To get a sense of his disturbed mindset, look at this quote. This is from his first cipher. which was cracked in August 1969 by a clever couple in San Francisco. He explicitly says that hunting men is the ultimate thrill. But guys, it gets darker. In the rest of that decoded message, he reveals this utter delusion that the people he murdered would become his slaves in the afterlife.
Over the next few years, the taunting just continued. He mailed in that bloody piece of the cab driver's shirt. He threatened to blow up a school bus, which, as you can imagine, sent the entire region into a total panic and forced police to tail buses for weeks. But in a later letter featuring a notoriously difficult cipher, one that actually took computer software until the year 2020 to finally decode, he made a massive slip. He wrote, "I have a bomb in my basement." Now that was a crucial geographical clue. Back in the late 60s, basements were incredibly uncommon in Bay Area apartments. So this told police that the killer probably didn't live in the immediate urban center, but likely in a detached house with a basement a bit further out.
So, putting it all together, what did the complete forensic footprint actually look like? Law enforcement, working alongside agencies like the CIA, determined this was absolutely no ordinary citizen. He had military-grade tactical knowledge. The crime scene boot prints were identified as wing walkers, which were specialty footwear primarily sold at military surplus stores. And, of course, his ability to construct those complex, multi-layered codes pointed directly to advanced cryptology experience, highly likely obtained during military service.
Section 5. Prime suspects and evidence. Matching the profile to the persons of interest.
So we have our profile, right? Now we try to put a name to the phantom. The immense publicity of the case brought out dozens of false confessors, which totally muddied the waters. But investigators eventually narrowed a list of over 50 people down to a few prime suspects. Let's cross-reference the two biggest names against our hard forensic evidence. First up, Arthur Lee Allen. The circumstantial evidence here was incredibly heavy. He had the military background. He even owned a literal Zodiac brand watch that featured the exact crosshair logo the killer used. But, and it's a massive but, his handwriting didn't match the letters, and his fingerprints didn't match those left on the cab. He died in 1992, never charged. Then you have Richard Gajkowski, whose facial features were a striking match to the police sketches. Yet again, the hard forensic evidence, handwriting, and fingerprints completely exonerated him. Ultimately, nobody perfectly fit the whole shebang.
And finally, Section 6, an unsolved mystery. The final scorecard.
Despite decades of intense scrutiny, this case file remains wide open. Let's look at the ultimate haunting discrepancy here. On January 30, 1974, the killer sent his final verified letter, and he signed off with this chilling scorecard, Me 37, SFPD 0. He claimed 37 lives. However, based on his distinct methods and the verifiable evidence, law enforcement only officially attributes 5 murders to the Zodiac. So you have to wonder, was he just exaggerating to maintain his reign of terror? Or are there 32 other victims out there we simply don't know about?
As we wrap up this Explainer Today, team, I want you to look at this final question. We know his methods. We've mapped his behavioral patterns. We know exactly how he slipped through the fingers of the police on a foggy October night. But beyond the delusions of an afterlife and his obsession with cryptic games, what was his true, underlying motive? And most importantly, who was the man beneath the hood? The evidence is all there, just waiting for someone to finally put the pieces together. Remember this as you approach your own case files out in the field. The absolute smallest overlooked detail could be the key to unmasking a monster. Class dismissed.